Hi, Mauricio.
Hello.
So Mauricio
Hello.
is our director of our
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm just admitting everyone here. We have a lot of people that are coming for this.
Hey, Odie.
Hey, Lyman.
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, happy.
Okay, well, this is a great turnout we have here. Let me just admit some more people here. Okay. Just give a few more minutes for people to join. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? So I'll just introduce our speaker. So we're very honored to have Dr. Lionel Robert here with us today. He'll be talking about diversity, equality, and inclusion or not in the age of AI and robotics. So Dr. Robert is a professor at the School of Information at the University of Michigan. He is also an AIS Distinguished Member Cum Laude and an IEEE Senior Member. And his research focuses on collaboration through and with technology. So he's also the director of MAVERICK, which stands for the Michigan Autonomous Vehicle Research Intergroup Collaboration. He's also affiliated with the University of Michigan Robotics Institute and their National Center for Institutional Diversity. He is also served on various program committees such as AAAI, ACM, Conference on Human Factors and Computing Systems. The list goes on, many different program committees. He's served on various different editorial boards, such as the MIS Quarterly, the ACM Transactions on Social Computing, and many others as well. He has a lot of participation in a lot of different academic committees and editorial boards, and his research has been sponsored by the AAA Foundation, the Automotive Research Center at the U.S. Army, the Army Research Laboratory, ARL, the Toyota Research Institute, National Science Foundation. And he has appeared in many news publications on print and radio and television, including ABC, CNN, CNBC, Michigan Radio, New York Times, and Associated Press. So, and with that, I'll allow Dr. Robert to take it away. Thank you so much. We're honored to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to be here. So I'm going to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, or not in the age of AI and robotics. It's going to be a little different slant than what you might be expecting. So I'm interested in getting feedback on that. So let me start off with an outline. I typically don't use outlines, but I'm going to use one now because it might come in pretty helpful. So one, I'm going to start off by telling you who I am, my background and my current context, because that sort of sets the stage for how I do things and how I see things on that known. Then we'll talk about diversity and human collaboration, the benefits of diversity, the challenges of diversity. And then we'll talk about my own research. And I want to make it clear that I'm going to cover my research as an example of the stuff being done, but I, by no means, I'm the only person doing research in this area, right? Then I'll talk about my research in human-robot similarity. And then I'll open it up because I want to know about potential problems, or I anticipate some potential problems with this type of research going forward. And I'll be interested in hearing what other people think also. So, and then I'm going to tie back into this diversity, equity, and inclusion a little bit more tighter toward the end when I introduce these problems. So here we go. So this is me. My background, I got my PhD in information systems from Indiana University Kelley School of Business. I had a minor in social informatics from the Rob Kling Center, social informatics. Only at the time I got my PhD, Rob Kling was on my committee. He passed away later and they named the center after him, but at that time he was my committee member. I am a post positive. If you don't know what that is, that's a good thing for you. If you do know what it is, then you know where I'm coming from, right? The idea is that basically, as someone who initially do a lot of experimental research, I sort of accepted the fact that it's very difficult to completely remove myself from my study, and I try to deal with some of the potential biases associated with the fact of that, right? Rather than ignore them. I'm currently a professor in the School of Information. School of Information, for the most part, you can think about it as centered around human-computer interaction, very social, technical view of technology and people. We use, all types of approaches to research, including ethnography and lab studies. I also sit in the Robotics Institute, which, unlike most robotics institute, ours is in the College of Engineering. So it's much more of the faculty are engineers, not computer scientists. And they're, I think I would say they are beginning to be more open to the fact that, that humans use technology, right? I think the College of Engineering has a new motto, which is human-centered engineering, and that was recent. So I think they're coming along there, right? But I sit in those two different spaces, right? When I do this research. So for full disclosure, so the picture of me in 2011 that's on my webpage that you'll see a lot of was from 2011. And the picture of me now that you see next to that, and hopefully in this Zoom, is me from 2023. I only highlight that because I've been to several conferences where people have stopped me and asked me, am I the same guy? And I was like, okay, so let me say this. This guy over here was from 2011 and he was pre-COVID. This guy here is 2023 and he's post-COVID. So the same person, in case you're wondering like, hey, who's that guy over there? Looks a lot older apparently, right? That being the case, from this point on, I would use this picture. So just full disclosure. So because of my background, I publish in a lot of different places. I publish in journals like Information Systems Research, JASIS, Transportation Part C, IEEE Robotics and Automation Letters, you name it, multiple conferences, different types of conferences. I publish in conferences where people will consider the conference the end venue, and in some cases where they don't, and engineering conference, computer science conferences. My sources of funding have also been very unique, and as mentioned earlier, I've been on several different outlets. So I consider myself a collaboration scholar. And so it's like, what does that mean? Well, in general, I study or try to advance our understanding of the mechanisms that would underlie and promote effective ways to collaborate. So I define collaboration as the act of working together in some type of collective to accomplish a common goal. My research can typically be divided up into 3 areas of collaboration, which is communication, cooperation, and coordination. So before I got tenure, I would say I'm a person who studies human collaboration through technology. And this was typically in the forms of virtual teams, which are teams that are distributed and rely on technology to communicate, and even to the point of online crowds, right? So if I was taught before tenure, if someone stops you and asks you about your research, you need to have an elevator speech. And so my elevator speech was, I study how technology alters teamwork and how we could better design technology to promote teamwork. So that was my 2-sentence spiel when I went to conferences as a pre-tenure faculty member, right? Now, post-tenure, I would say I've shifted over to the idea of studying human collaboration with technology, right? So the technology isn't some medium by which people will engage in communication. The technology is, in fact, a collaborator, right? And this has come in the form of human robot interaction, in particular, a lot of stuff with human and autonomous vehicle interaction, to name a few, and human AI interaction. So for common definition, at the University of Michigan, we define a robot as an AI with a physical embodiment that can act or react in the physical world, right? So if you say, what's the difference between an AI and a robot has to have a physical body, right? So because we have an AI institute or AI group in Michigan, we have robots, and the difference is that robots typically involve or include some element of kinematics, right? So that's, but that's from a terminology standpoint. I know people use different terms, but at the University of Michigan, this is how we separate the two areas. They're definitely related, but this is how they're separated. So basically, when I first started studying human collaboration through technology, one of the things I was really interested in was understanding the diversity in these teams, right? So there was this long-lasting literature on this issue of teams, collaboration diversity, where there was this tension between the actual collaborative benefits of diversity versus some of the challenges of diversity, right? That I wanted to resolve or to go into. So I define diversity as either real differences or perceptions of differences. Either way can manifest or the actual effects of it, and they're of course often tightly coupled, right? There's I look at diversity in two ways. There's surface level diversity like gender, race, and age. Then what we call deep level diversity, diversity in your values, attitudes, and beliefs, right? In reality, theoretically, they can be orthogonal and separate, but in reality, in many cases, they are related, right? So here's the results of the election between Hillary Clinton and Trump. You can see that the way people voted was, in line with things like their race and gender. So, so the idea is that deep level and surface level can be separated, but oftentimes they're intertangled together. So the actual benefits of diversity, if you ever read theories, that people who have different, who are different tend to have different information, which leads to different sources of unique information for a group or organization, and the sources of information, attitudes, beliefs, views, experience, education. And it goes like this. More sources of unique information can lead to more informed decision. More informed decision leads to better decisions. Then better decisions lead to better collaborative performance. Hence, diversity can lead to better collaborative performance, right? That's the idea behind the chain of events, why diversity can be a good thing. Then there's something referred to as the challenges of diversity that we're talking about, right? And they are manifest themselves into what these three mechanisms are: a theoretical basis, social categorization, social identification, and social comparison. So social categorization occurs when a person places himself or herself and others into categories or groups. So it's like I see somebody and I immediately engage in this in-group, out-group. The people I think are in my group, I like them, they're like me, and they become my social group. And the people I see who out-group members are not like me, I put an out-group member, they're not like me, and they become their own social group. It's important to remember that this happens oftentimes unconsciously, and it's not confined to a race or gender. It could be any particular little attribute, right? Could be North versus South, could be religion, could be Yankees versus the Red Sox, you name it, right? It's not one thing that causes this. It could be any particular thing. Then the idea of social identification occurs when we adopt the identity of that group and we carry out ourselves into that group. And then we engage in social comparison, where we compare our group against the other group and the way that our group looks better to that, right? So in-group members, we think, for one, we assume they are like us in all ways when it's possible. We tend to like them more, we care for them more, we assume they are more trustworthy, right? Why is that? Because it's self-fulfilling, we have self-esteem. If you're like me and I'm a good person, then you have to be a good person, right? This goes to the idea, right? Our group members can become them are all the same. In the worst case, they all become bad people. We can engage in unknowing, have biases against them. We may even, in extreme cases, discriminate against those people, right? So those are the mechanisms behind this idea of, people who are different people tend to have different information, but then you have this phenomenon that actually occurs. We take this integrated framework of diversity I just talked about. It goes kind of like this at a very high level. That basically diversity can lead to can reduce trust in a collaborator, and trust in the collaborator is very important for collaboration. All right. So if you take those two actual views and you put them together, you get this thing where one, diverse collaborations can perform better because of their unique sources of information, but diversity can also lead to in-group versus out-group problems, which can lead to conflict. And then on one hand, diversity can increase performance, but it's the same diversity can decrease performance, right? And so there's always this actual tension of finding ways to leverage the benefits of diversity while overcoming the challenges, right? So if you look at research by someone like Scott Page, they'll say that teams that are diverse, their performance can be much more varied. They can be really good or really bad. And teams that are less diverse tend to be more average, right? So when you do teams that are diverse, you can get a much higher performance than teams that are not, or you can get a much worse performance, right? It's about finding ways to leverage the benefits while overcoming the challenges, right? So I started off my career as an assistant professor saying, okay, how can I help meet the challenges, the diversity in human collaborations, get the benefits? And being an IS professor, I focus on this social technology interventions to actually accomplish this. And I'll run through several of my papers to give you an example of that, right? So here in this paper I did, so in the role of virtual teams meets diverse teams, the idea was that if we took a virtual environment by using, let's say, chat, and by separating people, we could effectively minimize the negative effects of diversity and focus on the positive impacts of diversity, right? But the research kept coming up inconclusive. Sometimes taking people who are diverse and separating them, having them use chat, sometimes it helps, sometimes it hurts. And we couldn't figure out what was going on. So in this study, what I argue is that the impacts of the virtual environment are not consistent across diversity. It varies by the type of diversity. And so what we show is that basically virtual environments are really good for racial diversity, but can be problematic for gender diversity, right? And so in this study, we show that basically, this explains why sometimes virtual teams can be good for diverse teams, and sometimes it can be bad. It all depends on the actual type of diversity. And for this, we had like 46 teams. And these teams were real teams. They interacted 6 to 8 weeks. And they came in the lab and they performed this half face-to-face, half virtual. And then they were expected to continue to work beyond that to make a decision. So it's one study. Here's another study I did with my colleagues, where basically we developed an application called the e-profile application. So, and the underlying logic is like this. Ultimately, we are all diverse and we're all similar, right? We know that, right? One of the reasons why things like race and gender are so important, because they're so obvious immediately, right? That's why they immediately will trip this whole process, right? But theoretically, we all are diverse and all quite similar. So what we thought is that we'll build this device where it would only highlight how people are similar. So we took teams into a virtual environment, 46 teams. This was a different study. And so both teams, the actual members were distributed. They got behind the computer. They fill out these applications where they listed all their demographics, their values, beliefs, personality, you name them, right? All their skills. But for one set of team, they were immediately exposed to all the similarities they had with their team members before they engaged in this collaborative action, actual task, right? And the other half of the teams were not, right? We found out that when we use this e-profile, and this was done at random, and we verified that the teams were actually no more different than each other, right? The actual two sets of teams were as equally similar or not. But in the teams that got the e-profile, they had less conflict, less relational conflict, less task conflict, were able to establish a higher level of shared understanding of the group and perform better, right? So the idea that basically by helping people believe they're similar, or helping people realize their similarities, when they did come up with differences, they were able to resolve them a lot better. right? Just by having this idea that in some way we're similar, that when things did come up, we had discussions, we dealt with it differently. So that's one way I looked at this idea. Another approach we did recently was looked at this idea of this concept of collectivism versus individualism. So you have this thing where in brainstorming teams that are diverse can come up with a lot more unique ideas and but they often have a hard time of working together after they come up with these ideas to pick a team decision, right? Because on one hand, they're diverse, really good, unique ideas. On the other hand, they struggle to actually accept each other's ideas and make decisions. So here we actually did it where we basically primed one set of teams to engage in collectivism, and another set of team more in individualism, right? And so what ends up happening is that in the set of teams that were primed for collectivism, their perceived diversity was associated with more creativity and more team satisfaction. And the teams that were not, their perceived diversity didn't have any impact at all. So once again, this idea of basically finding ways to leverage diversity and overcome the actual challenges. And in my case, it was through technology or social technical interventions. So this was what I did for the first part of my career, and CSW, name it virtual team, so sort of philosophy, right? And so that takes me to where we're going now. So at this point in my career, so when I was basically going for tenure, it's like, okay, my tenure packet, what do you do? Well, my contribution was developing social technical interventions to meet the challenges of diversity and human collaboration. Once again, I was not the only person actually doing this. There were other people doing it, but just talking about my work and the theoretical logic that underlies what drove me to a large part or the beginning part of my career. Now, and so in that sense, you can say I was working to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? But now let's fast forward. Now, I'm studying the problem of trying to integrate humans and robots into one workforce. Basically, I get a lot of phone calls from people in the media, and they say, "Oh, are robots going to be taking the jobs? They're not going to be any humans." And it's like, well, no. So it turns out that humans are actually pretty useful. Humans are good at ad hoc problem solving. They're pretty flexible. Robots are really good at doing the same thing over and over again and lifting heavy objects without getting hurt. So ultimately, in the future, the actual future is going to be a hybrid workforce of humans and robots, right? And if you talk to people who, I've talked to corporations that leverage a lot of robots, and they say the big problem they're having now is that people don't feel comfortable working with the robots. So, and I'll give you the spiel for that. For the last 25 or 50 years in research, we know that people may take a job because they need the money, but they keep coming back to see their friends, right? Work is a social place. We get our social interactions filled there. If you replace their friends with robots, then you can have potential problems, right? So the idea was, okay, how can we create this situation where people feel comfortable, trust, and engage and collaborate to work with robots who sometimes are threatened by these robots, right? And this is a big issue because in the next 10 to 20 years, we should expect almost half of our workforce to be replaced with robots. So you can have this more hybrid force. So here we go. So how do we meet the challenges of promoting robots and human collaboration via some social technical intervention? So once again, here I am again, different problem, same kind of mechanisms, right? So let's go forward here. So as you remember, here's the original framework that I presented earlier, what talks about this framework of diversity, trust, and collaboration to try to explain why diversity can be good and can be bad. Now, if I take this framework from my previous research area and I bring it into this context, we can take this framework as it is and we can flip it on its head like this. If I want to promote trust, collaboration with a robot, I can now take these same mechanisms and promote similarity, which will then promote trust in a robotic collaborator, which would then promote humans' acceptance and collaboration of robots. All right. So this is what I've been doing post-tenure for the most part in my career. So let's go through some of the papers I did here. So one of the first papers I did here was I had teams of 2 people and 2 robots. And they had to, in this case, they were accomplishing a task with robots. It was, and basically the idea was that if I could promote the humans more emotional attachment to the robots, would that lead to better team performance? So so basically what we did was we promoted robot identification. So in one set of teams, we had the human build a robot. And then we promoted team identification. And one set of teams, we actually had the humans all wear a t-shirt, the same color t-shirt. And they could put they also put t-shirts on their robots, and they gave themselves a team name. Then one set of group, they did both of those things, right? So, and of course, they had a control group. And what we found out was, so what was pretty interesting about this task, it was very much an objective task. So here we have this course where the human was operating a robot. Their job was to take the robot and move one water bottle from point A to point B. Person 2 would take their robot and go from point B to point C. So performance was actually how fast they can get all the water bottles across the course. So very much objective. This was to simulate basically what you see in construction sites, and even to some extent in space effort, in NASA, where people are using robots from a distance to accomplish work. And lo and behold, it turns out that, yeah, we were able to promote the team emotional attachment to the robots. And by doing so, that led to better performance and more team viability, which means that the team members actually wanted to stay in the team, right? And that was through the idea of identification, right? So then this next one I did was basically, me and my student, we looked at, could we manipulate similarity between humans and the robot co-worker? And if we did that, if we led them to believe they were more similar, the robot, in terms of, say, work beliefs and the like, and in this case, it was gender was the surface level, and the deep level was work beliefs. Would that actually lead people to increase their trust in the robot? And if they did, would they basically want to work with that robot not only more, but prefer to work with a robot over a human? And so this is what we did here, right? This 2x2x2. We have people in the ducks here. And lo and behold, people did trust the robot if it was similar to them in terms of gender and work values, which led to more trust, more intention to work, and more willingness to actually work with the robot, right? So we see that it's also worked here. Here's another paper I did with my students, colleagues, where we basically wanted to see if similarity between a human and their autonomous vehicle, right? So if humans perceive their autonomous vehicle as being more similar to them on the big 5 personality traits, would that lead people, all things being equal, to believe that the autonomous vehicle was driving more safe? And so for here, we had these conditions of a 2x2, where we had AV driving. It was driving normal versus aggressively, and the conditions were snowy or were sunny or snowy, right? And the idea is that we looked at it by low similarity, high similarity, so on and so forth. And what you see here is that all things being equal, the more similar the person thought the robot was to them, to their personality, the more they felt the robot was driving safer, right? That would so that's a different context, but still the same underlying ideas there. We go here, me and my students, we looked at, we did a meta-analysis on several studies that examined the impact of human and robot similarity and personality to see, okay, does this work across studies? Is the idea of matching people with robot and human personality across these different types of robots, does it actually work? And yes, according to our meta-analysis, the more, when humans felt the robot was similar to them in personality, it actually promoted robot acceptance, right? People actually felt like, they actually were more willing to trust or engage in the robot, in general. So it's another paper we did at Romaine. So, and so now fast forward, some other things I'm doing. I started with some of my colleagues, we started studying the problem of COVID and misinformation, and in particular, misinformation in African-American communities. And one of the ways people get out more information is through chat box. but this is, it's been popular in some communities, had not been very popular in African-American communities. So what we've been doing, we've been studying, trying to find ways to contextualize or make the chatbot more similar to the African-American to promote trust and use of the COVID-19 information, right? So the idea is that instead of having them go off and get information from unreliable sources, we can have a chat box that could basically direct them to more reliable information, and they will be more likely to trust that and use that information, right? If that robot was more like, if that chat box was perceived to be more like them. And so that means like maybe the face could, it's could be African American, the language, the actual websites will be more contextualized. We're not the only people doing this research. I should point out Christine Harrington at CMU is also doing this very same thing, right? So it's the idea that if you can design these chat boxes and make them more culturally relevant, you can promote more identification and more trust in these communities. They're going to use it, and they're going to trust the information more, right? So very much the same concept, but in different contexts, right? But you can go back. So this is the paper, we're working on this now. So what does that mean? Let's take a big picture view. Okay, we can promote human acceptance of robots and AI via similarity, right? So basically, if we make these robots, make humans believe these robots are similar to them, people are more likely to trust them and engage in them, right? Now, here's the question I would open up to the audience eventually is, but should we? Should we? So I'm gonna go a little bit further here, right? And you may be thinking, what does this really have to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion? Right? You kind of get to touch it. Okay, here's where I'm going, and this is a big picture question. It's a question I'm asking myself now. I don't have an answer to it, but it's a question I would want, and I want all of us to begin to answer, or ask ourselves, I should say. And I would like to get some, and I would like to see what you think about this. So right now, we're at a time where technology, and we engage in what people call smart technology, autonomous vehicle, Alexa. There's the sex robots. I can tell you, as AI and robotics advance, there's not one industry that will benefit more or has benefited more than the sex robot industry. We're having intelligent refrigerators. We're having robots as customer service. And of course, people are engaging in these robotic pets. And so, and in order to promote the acceptance of these devices, we've been basically immuning these AI robots with personality and traits to make them more similar to the user to promote the use of these devices, right? And so, and you can imagine why there's all this customization, personalization, but the idea is that we're developing these social agents that are just like you, so that you would trust them and so that you would use them, right? And this, and we know this works. We know this works, and we know if you started a robotics company tomorrow and you wanted to make money and you wanted to promote sales, I would say make the robot very similar to your customer, because then that will promote trust and use, right? The question is, and this is a question I have for the audience, and it's a question I'm beginning to ask myself. I don't have the answer to this question on caveat, but one, are we beginning to support what I would call technology-induced segregation, where basically people are only interacting with social agents that are like them? We see some of the problems in that with social media, where people are getting echo chambers, right? But at least those people are actual people in most cases, right? But if we're designing technologies to be just like people to promote the use, or and people are going to be surrounded by all these smart devices, they're going to be interacting with social agents that are just like them, right? And is that some form of technology-induced segregation? And also, is this going to inhibit personal growth and societal integration, right? Often we learn to work with people who are not like us, right? That's part of growth, accepting the fact that people are not like you and still having to work with different people, right? That's a part of being part of a society, right? This is the whole benefit of when we integrated our school system, a large part of that was that we were better off learning to live together, working through our differences on the playground when we were in kindergarten than we were in the voting booth when we were adults, right? But is this type of design that we're doing, is this inhibiting personal growth and societal integration? And what impact will this have on our society going forward? So if we have people who are, if you have a choice, you can only, you can go downstairs to the basement and interact with your robotic pet dog who you agree with, then go out in the world and interact with people who are independently different and you engage, that you can't predict their behavior. What are you going to choose? We've seen from a lot of these echo chambers where people tend to choose, they tend to go the easier, softer way. They tend to aggregate with people who are just like them. But in this case, you can go even further in that because you can design agents that can be exactly like the way you want them to be. And that's easy. It's hard to go out in the world and deal with people with their own opinions, their own attitudes, their own behaviors, right? But that requires growth. This is how we all come together as a society. This is how we can live together with different viewpoints and different ideas. But are we essentially undercutting that even more so when we are designing these technologies to be particularly to cater and be like these individuals at a level that we haven't been able to do before, at a scale that we haven't been able to do before, right? So a person has the potential in 20 years to wake up and spend their whole day interacting with social agents that are designed to cater to them. How much harder will that be when they go out in the world and have to talk to someone else who isn't that way, right? So that's my big picture question. I want to say thanks and open up the questions, but I want to go back to this again to say, this is one of the things that, so the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, I guess the idea is that, are we beginning, are the things we're doing in the short term to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, in some ways, are those things going to undercut diversity and equity inclusion in the long run when we can design these social agents that can be exactly like you? So that's all I have. I want to say thanks, and I would love to hear your comments and feedback from that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robert. That was really fascinating. I learned so much and really opened my mind to think in different ways about these issues. So I have some questions myself, but I'll try and open it up to the floor first. If people want to raise their hand, I can call on people, or if they don't feel comfortable talking through their microphone, they can also put it in the chat and I'll say the question. So let's see. Okay, so Oded has a question. Oded, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thanks, Lionel, for a fascinating talk. And I very much share with you this concern of creating these echo chambers on steroids. And the one, and I obviously I don't have a solution, but I think that it's a question that's worth asking. The one thing that I find particularly concerning is that these social agents become also very, very sophisticated linguistically. So not only are they embodied, but they have the skills to chat, to talk, and to actually to interact physically in ways that are way, way more sophisticated than we saw in the past, and learn and adjust to their counterparts. So you could imagine, I mean, this dystopian scenario that you described, in my mind, would also include language-based interactions, and it's a big problem. And I mean, I think we as a community, we can think about how design could address that, but beyond that, it's going to be a struggle between corporations or whoever makes the final design decisions versus the designers. But at least from our perspective, we need to find out best practices for avoiding such segregation by design. I like this term.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's also, I think what you're pointing out was that these social agents can probably be a lot better at adapting to our needs than the human can, in ways that we don't understand, right? And yeah, I agree with you.
Oh, Charalampos, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Lionel. And also, I don't know if you mentioned this in the beginning, I also want to share a big thank you as a junior scientist. Lionel on his website has his tenure track package, his his application package for those that are in the job market. So thank you for providing resources also for junior scientists like myself. I'm a postdoc.
No problem.
To my question, I was curious whether, so these are the challenges that you presented in terms of making robots more sophisticated and integrating them strongly and creating incentives to integrate them strongly in our operations and our day-to-day. Now, starting from there, what can we learn to sort of go beyond these mechanical interactions that we have? And maybe do the questions that you pose, the fact that I can substitute this interaction with a robot, say something about how do we now, maybe since this is can be done by a robot, what is sort of a deeper process or a deeper relationship? What does that look like between, say, an employee and their peers, an employer and an employee, someone who chats with a bot? What does someone who goes beyond the chat box do, and what do these qualifications look like, sort of looking ahead?
So for me, my concern is that the chat box will become so good that people won't look beyond them. Like I won't go to my peer. I'll just, if I need a friend, I'll talk to my chat box the whole time. My friend over there, he's a Red Sox fan, and I don't like him that much anyway, right? And this chat box is everything I wanted to say. Why should I even leave this thing? I don't need to be friends with that person, right? So that's my concern. Is that basically it's like it gets to be. We all know, if you've been in a committee, right? You get different opinions, different ideas. It takes work. It takes emotional labor to deal with people you don't agree with. People are different, but that's a part of growth, right? And so my concern is that as these technologies become more sophisticated, then they can replace more of these interactions that we have with humans, and people might prefer them over the humans. So one thing you might want to say is, and maybe I haven't. So one thing you can do is, because basically what they did in social media, they tried to expose people to different types of news, right? And then people hated that, and that bred a lot of conspiracy theories, right? So the idea is that basically if you're conservative, well, expose you to an article that's liberal and vice versa. And all they did was encourage people to believe in conspiracy theories. And so people reacted very negatively, right? But you can imagine if you have a robot in the beginning that's quite similar with the human, but maybe over time you alter it and make it a little bit different and force that person. But it's our job. Is that ethical in itself? No.
Thank you.
So yeah, I guess I have one thought is in terms of like the questions you ask the audience, it's not like an exact answer, but just kind of a brainstorming topic is, it seems that like, for instance, like you said, like we're more likely to feel comfortable around people that we're similar with. Now, if we become conscious of the fact that we're doing that, right, we could call that a bias that we have. If someone brings that unconscious bias to our consciousness and points it out,
Yes.
then will we suddenly change that habit, right? Will we stop? Will we be like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I need to redirect my, thoughts about who I want to be interacting with. So maybe like a way of like, kind of, not just a matter of like catering to people's biases with these AI bots, but actually using the bots to point out to them their biases in a way that's not accusatory, but just, factual. Like you are, like based on our statistics, we see that you are preferring this, and we see that this might be part of this bias, things like that, And again, like it's not just about gender and diversity, it can be about these deeper groups that we're saying we're seeing a bias towards this deeper category or this deeper category, and allow people to keep on questioning like why they're believing or disbelieving or liking or not liking something. So for instance, maybe on social media, if someone is more likely to at first react to an article and think it's conspiracy theory, maybe if there was some ranking to those articles on, okay, how similar or how what percentage does it have in terms of an echo chamber? Like how much is this article in line with your echo chamber versus outside of your echo chamber? And maybe if people saw that that metric, that it could make them think, okay, maybe I should keep more of an open mind before I judge this, because I see this is outside of my echo chamber.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And so I think you can, so the idea is that maybe you can inform people about it and they can see it. So if I think a little bit further, let me give you an example. So when I'm developing these chat box, right, for contextualized for African Americans, and one of the things that I think Christine Harrington did was she used the actual picture and stuff like that of a Black doctor, right? So now let's take that and turn it on his head. Why don't we give that chat box to a white person? Right, and that white person gets used to of getting medical information from Black doctors. Maybe that promotes diversity. Maybe that's one way around it, right? But here's the problem: if you are a company and you're trying to sell that chat box to that individual, you want to encourage them to use, not to discourage them, right? So there's this element of doing what's best for society in the long run, over the fact that you got to make money tomorrow. The customer doesn't want the product. What are you going to do? Yeah, and so that's a good point.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay, looks like someone wrote a question in the chat. So it's from Aich King, and he says, just like with the image and music generating algorithm AI, it feels like this is something that needs to be put on pause so that ethics and law can catch up and start sorting out who, what, where, and how before corporations at all take them too far into ruining social fundamentals in the pursuit of profits, etc.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. The problem is, I think, it's hard. I agree with you. It's like, there's a whole lot of calls now going on right now for people asking, calling for halts or pauses on development of AI until we get around to it, right? Part of the problem is, once the horse is out of the barn, it's hard to bring it back, right? That becomes part of the problem. It's gone. Second thing is, so in the U.S. we have a lot of freedom. I mean, you look for better or for worse, right? I mean, if you can buy a gun, no one's doing anything to stop that. Hard to imagine you're going to convince the government to do something about this, right? And this becomes part of the problem. It's like it's this twist between what can you really do. I think Joe Biden is now trying to come up with some new regulations, but it's like you can imagine if you can get like all these companies to agree to a pause, but I don't know how you can make them pause, right? No, yeah, no, yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions they want to bring up or discussion points? Okay, Alicia Lampika, you're muted if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, well, first of all, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for your time and generosity. What separates humans from AI and robotics? The response I found is perhaps a empathy and moreover cognitive empathy. What are your thoughts about it, please?
Yeah, it's good. So I actually gave a talk about this before about
Sorry.
No, not doing it, not here, someplace else. So yeah. So because basically, so it all depends on your view, right? So there's a view called post-humanist, where there's no difference between a person and an AI, right? So basically, you can the same way that they're going to say the same way that you have to teach people to have empathy, right? There's some people who don't have empathy, right? We know that we have to teach some people. That's like programming, the same way you program a robot to have empathy. And so they're going to say there's no real difference in that.
And I was very impressed. Well, I'm in my 50s, and unfortunately I haven't found my partner. So I'm not able to, I cannot be a mom myself. So and I came across idea from Sophia that she wanted to be a mother, and I said, oh, good. I'm planning to go back to the UK, and just one of my projects is just because I understand how important it is just to take care of the mother even when she's pregnant, and just to join, just to think of a joint project with AI robotics, for example, just to take care of babies, just to become virtual mothers.
Yeah.
Worldwide. And and also there's another thing. It's when we say let's say I've been a silent advocate. Please allow me to say this: silent advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, PQ, and EI. And the thing is that I was wondering about the difference, the concept. Let's say if you have equity and equality. I remember being told that with a very vivid image, like three human beings watching a football match. And it was a kind of a laugh.
Yeah.
Or bench, the difference. You not let's say in order for the head to be the same height, not the same, let's say, bench for them to be strapped. So in a few words, or you are an expert, equity versus equality, what's the difference?
Yeah, so it's a big difference. So here's the difference. You ever heard the saying is no work, no eat? That's an equity statement, right? No work, no eat. Equality is, everybody eats, even if they can't work. So it's a big difference.
Okay, very good example. Very, very good example. And well, needless to say, I'd like to connect with you.
Sure.
For LinkedIn, I've already,
Sure.
And actually, I would like to schedule a phone call if possible, and just to collaborate with you, your research.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. Yeah, feel free to email me at University of Michigan, my website, or LinkedIn. I'll look for your name.
Okay.
Either one.
Okay, lovely, lovely. It's Alicia MC Lampita. You already have a connection request.
Okay.
I'm so honored to be here, and I'd like to gain access to your previous. For me, it's a kind of it's a masterclass. So thank you.
Okay.
Well, I just accepted your
I have no words
LinkedIn first. No problem. Thank you.
Lovely.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments they want to make? I guess if no one else has any questions, I had one kind of random question from earlier in your talk. You gave an example of how when you were looking at virtual versus in-person collaboration, and you saw that for virtual collaboration it was worse for gender diversity but better for racial diversity. And I was just curious, like, I'm not sure if your study dealt with this, but what did you have any theory as to why that was? Yeah,
so you ever heard the idea of a flaming? Okay, so basically what happens is, men are pretty bad at recognizing social cues, right? Women are pretty good at it, right? When you go in a virtual environment, you take away the social cues, men become much more aggressive, but women are still able to interpret those social cues. So what happens is that basically for gender diversity, things can get worse. Likewise, if you face to face, it tends to remind people who they're talking to, right? And yeah. But like racial diversity is the opposite. Basically putting in a virtual environment, separating people and trying not to remind them who they are, actually gets them to focus on what's being said and not who said it.
So interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's.
Go ahead.
There's actually a lot of research that shows that women are actually, the gender diversity actually makes teams better. But that's mostly face-to-face teams, right? And so it's, I mean, so if you look at the literature, in many cases, gender diversity has actually been the things that actually beneficial to teams, not problematic.
Right. And then and then you notice the opposite with racial diversity. Was there another reason for that? Like,
Yeah, I mean, basically, that's where you get not reminding people who they are actually benefits, right? People focus on the message. No one focuses on who said what, right? There's not all these assumptions of why you said this. So they seem to diffuse the situation.
are we talking about when you don't have video, when you're just chatting?
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
I see. Very interesting. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Robert. This was just a really fascinating talk. If we all want to just give the speaker another round of applause, we really appreciate you being here.
And no problem. Thanks for having me. Like I said, it was a different take on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but and this could be a problem that we might have in the future. I'm glad Odie was here because, you know, I wasn't sure if anyone was going to buy into the problem. I think people are so focused on what we can do right now with the technology that they're not really thinking about the repercussions of it later, maybe.
Now, unfortunately, I think that the problem is here to stay and become bigger.
Yes.
And it's on us to think of ways to at least offer ways to address it, probably not to solve it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I also really like your sequential approach where it's like you started by looking at, you know, these diversity mechanisms, then you're looking, the next step in the sequence is how do we apply that to AI? But then the next step in the sequence is, okay, how do we reflect on this application and its implications, and kind of just to keep kind of retrospectively or introspectively questioning your own research and what is, you know, the moral implications of it and how it's used in the next step. And kind of like taking a step outside, constantly kind of taking a step outside your own context and seeing how it's related to a larger context is really fascinating.
And I got to thank you guys for, because when I got an invite to get the first talk, you know, for the talk, I was going to present one of my papers, but then I think someone said, no, you know, you can also present your overall research and think about these other ideas. And that, you know, and was, you know, that is, you know, I'm not sure which one of you folks encouraged me to do that, but that was really got me thinking, well, you know, maybe I can use this time to do just this. So actually, I owe that to you folks for, you know, for encouraging me to think about not just presenting the paper, but maybe going beyond that. So.
Okay, yeah, I think Shar Lampos might have been involved in that. So thank you, Shar Lampos, for your help with that brainstorm. Well, okay, thank you so much, Dr. Robert, again, and I guess we'll close the meeting here at 1 p.m. Yeah, thank you so much. I hope to be in touch with you in the future.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. I'll see you guys again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for having me.
Bye. Have a
Bye-bye.
lovely weekend.
You too.
Lovely. Lots of love.